Before the first human gaze ever rose to the night sky, the moon had already become a museum of cosmic memory. Its pale surface, cold and unchanging, bears the marks of countless collisions that span billions of years. Without an atmosphere to shield it from the rain of meteoroids, every fragment from the depths of space met the ground unimpeded, leaving behind circular wounds that never faded. No wind has ever whispered across its plains. No water has ever flowed to smooth the scars. And deep beneath, the world remains still. Its geology asleep, its history exposed. Each crater overlaps another, forming a silent labyrinth of time, etched in dust and stone. Yet the strangest truth lies in their sameness. Vast or tiny, all descend to nearly the same depth. In this still and airless world, the moon stands as a witness to eternity, unchanged, unhealed, and forever illuminated by the light of what once was. Beneath the calm glow of Earth's satellite lies a riddle carved in stone. Across the moon's surface, craters differ enormously in width, yet their depths remain strikingly alike. In planetary science, such uniformity is not expected. Impacts of different sizes should pierce to varying levels. The pattern defies the usual logic of physics that governs celestial bodies. Some of these basins are so broad that their floors rise gently outward, as though the lunar crust resisted being pushed in. This curious shape suggests that something beneath the dust and rock halts the downward force of impact. A few researchers have speculated about an unusually strong subsurface layer, perhaps a dense geological stratum unknown in its exact composition. Others, moving beyond accepted models, have imagined a buried metallic core or shell that limits penetration. Mainstream studies find no evidence for metal structures or hollow interiors, yet the persistence of identical depths continues to intrigue scientists. Whatever lies beneath, the moon holds its secret in silence, its scars uniform, its mystery intact. A quiet reminder that even familiar worlds can still conceal the unknown. On November 20th, 1969, the crew of Apollo 12 prepared to leave the lunar surface. Commander Charles Conrad, Jr. and lunar module pilot Alan Bean detached their ascent stage from the spent rocket that had lifted them from the moon. Before rejoining the command module, they directed the empty stage to fall deliberately back to the surface. The impact took place near a small seismograph that had been placed there earlier, part of an experiment to study the moon's internal vibrations. When the module struck, the instruments detected something extraordinary. The moon's crust shuddered and resonated for nearly an hour, as though sound were traveling through a great metallic body. It was the first indication that the lunar interior might be far less dense than expected. Intrigued by the data, Dr. Wernher von Braun, then at the head of NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, arranged for a second, more massive impact during Apollo 13. When that section of rocket collided with the surface, the tremors lasted more than 3 hours and reached depths estimated at over 20 miles. The result astonished the scientific community. Subsequent analysis showed that the effect was not literal ringing, but a slow release of seismic energy caused by the moon's extremely dry, fractured rock. Unlike Earth, which contains moisture and active geology that quickly dampen vibrations, the moon's rigid crust allows seismic waves to travel long distances. Despite this, the phenomenon inspired decades of speculation. Some writers proposed that such prolonged reverberations hinted at a hollow or metal-rich structure beneath the surface. In mainstream science, however, these ideas find no support. The moon's density, composition, and gravitational data confirm it is solid throughout. Still, that haunting echo, recorded half a century ago, remains one of the most evocative moments in lunar exploration, a soundless song in stone that continues to capture human imagination. In the mid-1960s, astronomer Carl Sagan reshaped modern thinking about the nature of celestial worlds. In his influential book, Intelligent Life in the Universe, published in 1966, he proposed clear boundaries for what could be considered physically possible. Among those ideas was the assertion that no natural satellite, no moon formed through cosmic processes, could ever be hollow. For Sagan, such a structure would defy the known laws of planetary formation. Even so, later decades brought unusual data that rekindled speculation. When seismic instruments placed on the lunar surface during the Apollo missions recorded deep, sustained reverberations, some observers interpreted the vibrations as evidence that parts of the moon might contain vast cavities. While mainstream science attributes those echoes to the moon's brittle, dry crust, where seismic waves can travel much farther than they do on Earth. The notion of a hollow or partially artificial moon continues to linger at the edges of imagination. If any portion of the moon were truly excavated or empty, such a condition could not have arisen naturally. It would suggest, however improbably, intervention by an intelligent hand beyond human history. Humanity's fascination with the moon reaches far deeper than the scientific age. From the first myths carved in stone to the calculations of modern astronomers, this glowing sphere has been both a mirror of human curiosity and a source of enduring mystery. For centuries, even its origin remained unsolved. Because the moon is so large compared with the planet it orbits, fully 1/4 of Earth's diameter, no conventional explanation seemed to fit. Early theories proposed that it might once have formed elsewhere in the solar system and was later captured by Earth's gravity. Yet such an event would require an almost impossible balance of forces. A cosmic coincidence so exact that the scenario strained the limits of basic physics. It was not until the final decades of the 20th century that a new model gained strength, the so-called giant impact hypothesis. According to this theory, more than 4 billion years ago, a young, molten Earth was struck at a glancing angle by another planetary body, roughly the size of Mars. The metallic core of that impactor merged with Earth's own, while vast sheets of vaporized rock and debris were thrown into orbit. Over time, those fragments coalesced, cooled, and solidified into the companion we know today as the Moon. The chemistry of lunar rocks brought back by Apollo astronauts strongly supports this explanation. Their isotopic fingerprints nearly identical to those of Earth's crust. Yet, even with this understanding, the Moon still holds strange harmonies. Its diameter, about 2,160 miles, and its orbital distance create a perfect illusion from our vantage point on Earth. The Sun's diameter is nearly 400 times greater than the Moon's, but the Sun also lies about 400 times farther away. The result is a precise balance in apparent size, allowing the Moon to cover the Sun exactly during a total solar eclipse. Such symmetry is almost non-existent elsewhere in the observable universe. Within the countless planetary systems astronomers have studied, no other known moon and star align so flawlessly. This alignment, along with the Moon's near-circular orbit, has inspired both awe and speculation. Some see design where others see coincidence, but all agree on its consequences. The Moon's steady gravitational influence anchors the tilt of Earth's axis, keeping our planet's rotation stable over vast spans of time. Without that stabilizing pull, Earth's tilt might fluctuate wildly, transforming the climate, and perhaps preventing complex life from developing at all. Computer simulations confirm that the presence of the Moon helps preserve the rhythm of the seasons, shaping everything from ocean currents to ecosystems. In this sense, the Moon does more than light our night skies. It maintains the balance that makes life possible. Its subtle gravity pulls at the oceans, creating the tides that have guided navigation, migration, and the cycles of countless coastal species. It influences the very heartbeat of the planet, setting a tempo by which both sea and soil respond. Across the ages, people have looked up at that silver disk and wondered whether its perfection is chance or design. Science sees it as a product of collision, chemistry, and time. Imagination sees it as a deliberate construction, perhaps even a message left in orbit. Between these two visions lies the truth of human curiosity itself, the need to understand, and the willingness to dream. The moon remains both an artifact of creation and a canvas for wonder. In the early 1950s, America was gripped by a fascination with the future. The atomic age had shattered old boundaries, and for the first time, the idea that humanity might travel among the stars felt almost within reach. Among those who saw possibility in this collective dream was a German-born rocket engineer named Wernher von Braun. He believed that imagination was the first stage of discovery, and that by turning fiction into vision, and vision into science, the impossible could become real. In 1952, von Braun brought that vision to life in the pages of Collier's magazine, where a series of illustrated articles showed readers detailed concepts of space stations, rocket ships, and the daily lives of men and women living beyond Earth. His mind combined engineering precision with a poet's sense of wonder, and his words transformed distant speculation into something tangible. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, the first man-made satellite to orbit the Earth, the world changed overnight. The United States, once content to imagine the future, was suddenly determined to build it. Von Braun and his team at the Army Ballistic Missile Agency were placed at the forefront of this new era. Drawing on his earlier V-2 designs, he and his engineers developed a series of rockets that would become the foundation for America's space program. In January of 1958, their Explorer 1 satellite soared into orbit, marking the nation's entry into the space age. What followed was a decade of relentless progress, culminating in the creation of the Saturn V, a towering machine of fire and mathematics that could lift humanity beyond the bonds of gravity. On July 20th, 1969, at the age of 57, Wernher von Braun stood inside Mission Control in Houston and watched a dream that had begun in his childhood take form before his eyes. The world held its breath as a human being stepped onto another world for the first time. In that moment, the long arc of history bent toward the stars. In just 6 decades, humanity had advanced from horse-drawn wagons to interplanetary flight, compressing centuries of progress into a single lifetime. Every detail of the Apollo missions demanded perfect precision. 1 fraction of a degree too steep, and the spacecraft could have missed the moon entirely. Every calculation, every mid-course correction, was a delicate act of balance between speed, gravity, and trust in human ingenuity. The success of that endeavor remains one of the greatest mathematical and technological feats ever achieved. Yet, as with all moments of great transformation, questions lingered. Some have wondered whether von Braun's extraordinary leap forward was entirely of human making. Speculative theories suggest that fragments of technology recovered from unknown origins, perhaps not of this world, might have contributed to humanity's sudden mastery of the heavens. Such ideas remain unproven, dismissed by mainstream science, but they persist in the mythos surrounding the early space age. A whisper that our journey to the moon may have been guided by knowledge beyond our own. Von Braun, however, looked far past the moon. He dreamed of colonies in orbit, of voyages to Mars, of civilizations extending into the void. His vision was not only to reach the stars, but to belong among them, whether driven purely by human ambition or by inspiration from something greater. His work bridged the gap between imagination and reality. In less than a lifetime, he turned humanity's oldest story, the dream of flight, into its greatest achievement. And when the first footprints marked the lunar dust, it was not only a victory of technology, but of spirit, the realization of a dream that had begun in the mind of a boy who once looked up at the night sky and decided he would go there. In November 1966, nearly 3 years before the Apollo astronauts set foot on the lunar surface, NASA's Lunar Orbiter 2 settled into orbit around the moon. Its mission was to photograph the terrain in extraordinary detail, providing the information needed to identify safe landing sites for the upcoming Apollo missions. Among the thousands of images it returned, one frame drew particular attention. Captured near the Sea of Tranquility, only about 300 kilometers from where Apollo 11 would later touch down, the photograph appeared to show a cluster of long, narrow shadows stretching across the lunar plain. To some, these shapes resembled tall spires, structures that, in silhouette, looked almost architectural. Later analysis measured several of them and suggested that the tallest might rise the equivalent of 15 stories. Their alignment and symmetry evoked the image of ancient obelisks standing silent against the void. For scientists accustomed to the moon's scarred and eroded landscape, such vertical forms were difficult to explain. Over billions of years, the lunar surface has been pelted by an endless storm of meteoroids, a process that tends to flatten and pulverize anything that stands above ground. The idea that a structure taller than a basketball hoop could survive intact for eons seemed improbable. Yet the spires were there, etched in sunlight and shadow, captured on film for all to see. Some researchers concluded they must be natural, perhaps the jagged peaks of crater rims or the remnants of ancient impacts, while others quietly wondered if the photograph hinted at something else. In those early years of the space race, rumors grew that NASA's interest in the region might have extended beyond geology. The suggestion, never confirmed, was that part of the Apollo program's objective was to examine these anomalies more closely. When Apollo 11 descended toward its landing site, the lunar module's computer registered a series of alarms, coded 1202, signaling that the system was processing more data than it could handle. The cause, as later explained, was that both of the lander's radars had been activated at once. One aimed downward to measure altitude, the other scanning sideways to detect nearby obstacles. Technically, the side radar was unnecessary on a flat plane, yet astronaut Buzz Aldrin chose to engage it anyway. Some have interpreted this as a precaution, taken because mission planners feared the presence of tall, uncharted objects near the descent path. Official accounts make no mention of such hazards, but the decision remains a small curiosity within the larger story of that landing. Behind these events lay an atmosphere of secrecy and caution. In the early 1960s, NASA had quietly commissioned the Brookings Institution to study how humanity might react if undeniable evidence of extraterrestrial life were discovered. The report advised that such information, if ever found, should be handled with care, suggesting that a revelation of that magnitude could destabilize society. In the years since, this document has fueled speculation that any extraordinary lunar findings, should they exist, were deliberately withheld from public view. Over time, amateur researchers and independent analysts have revisited thousands of lunar photographs from both American and Soviet archives, searching for irregularities that might hint at something artificial. Some of these anomalies are now understood as photographic artifacts or shadows misread by the human eye. Yet a few images continue to inspire debate. To those inclined toward mystery, the moon seems an unlikely place for such geometry. To others, its rugged beauty needs no artificial explanation. 3 years later, in July 1969, the story came full circle. As the Apollo 11 crew returned safely to Earth, crowds gathered in Huntsville, Alabama, to celebrate Wernher von Braun, the man whose vision had transformed imagination into reality. In the town square, thousands cheered beneath banners proclaiming that humanity had reached the moon. Photographs of the moment appeared in newspapers across the nation, capturing a scientist whose ideas had lifted an entire civilization into the heavens. Von Braun's achievement marked not only a triumph of engineering, but the culmination of a century-long dream. Whether the moon's strange features were sculpted by nature or hinted at something beyond, one truth remained. The line between mystery and discovery had forever changed, and humankind would never look at the night sky the same way again. Wernher von Braun never doubted that humanity's destiny reached beyond Earth. To him, space was not a distant dream, but an inevitable horizon waiting to be crossed. Within NASA, he became the defining voice of that conviction. The man regarded as the father of modern rocket science. His name was attached to nearly every milestone in American aerospace history. The development of the supersonic anti-aircraft missile, the first ballistic rockets, the launch of the nation's earliest satellites, and, above all, the creation of the Saturn V, the colossal machine that carried human beings to the moon. The Apollo program has often been called the greatest collective achievement in the story of humankind, and it was von Braun's vision and persistence that made it possible. Even today, the Saturn V remains the most powerful rocket ever built, a symbol of an age when engineering dared to rival imagination. Yet von Braun's genius was matched by a relentless determination to persuade others to believe in what he saw so clearly. In the 1950s, when the idea of space travel still sounded like fantasy, he joined forces with Walt Disney to capture the imagination of the American public. Through a series of educational films that reached an estimated 42 million viewers, von Braun outlined, in precise detail, how humanity would one day travel to space. He described protective suits, modular spacecraft, orbiting stations, lunar landing craft, and even expeditions to Mars. His words were delivered not as speculation, but as conviction. He believed that with a well-organized and properly supported program, a passenger rocket could be built and tested within a single decade. His certainty was contagious, transforming public curiosity into support for a national effort that would soon change history. The myth behind these ambitions had been shaped by a very different world. Werner Magnus Maximilian Freiherr von Braun was born on March 23, 1912, in the province of Eastern Prussia. The second of three sons in an aristocratic family, he grew up amid comfort and culture, yet his interests reached far beyond the expectations of privilege. From an early age, he displayed an uncommon blend of imagination and logic, a mind that could compose music one moment and calculate trajectories the next. His father often admitted he could not explain where his son's talent came from, describing the boy as a mystery. By the age of 4 or 5, Werner's parents recognized his extraordinary nature. Music came easily to him, but it was the night sky that truly captured his spirit. When his mother gave him a small telescope, he spent hours gazing at the moon, tracing its craters and plains through the eyepiece. It was then that he made a quiet promise to himself. One day, he would build the machine that would carry people there. Decades later, that childhood vow would be fulfilled on a world far above his own. On July 21st, 1969, nearly 21 and a half hours after the first landing on the lunar surface, the module named Eagle lifted off from the Sea of Tranquility. As its engines ignited, Mission Control in Houston confirmed the signal. Tranquility Base, Houston. Guidance, recommendation is good. You're clear for takeoff. The small craft rose gracefully into the blackness, leaving behind the first human footprints ever pressed into another world. In orbit above, the command module Columbia waited to carry its crew home. Watching from Earth, von Braun saw the culmination of everything he had imagined as a boy through the lens of that telescope. His life's work, part science, part dream, had bridged the gap between myth and reality. In less than 60 years, humanity had leapt from the horse and buggy to the surface of the moon, propelled by visionaries who refused to accept the limits of their time. And at the center of that transformation stood the man who once looked up at the stars and decided they were not out of reach. After more than 21 hours on the lunar surface, the Apollo 11 astronauts prepared to return home. They carried with them 47.5 pounds of lunar rock and soil, samples that would become the foundation for decades of scientific study. And they left behind several objects meant to outlast them. A set of instruments to record seismic activity, a small American flag, and a metal plaque bearing the words that marked humankind's first step onto another world. Yet among these artifacts rested something more symbolic. A small bag containing a golden olive branch, the ancient emblem of peace, and a thin silicon disc etched with messages of goodwill from 73 world leaders. It was both a gesture of diplomacy and a statement of hope, declaring that humanity had reached beyond its home world, not as conquerors, but as emissaries. For some, however, those tokens carried another layer of meaning. Speculative writers and so-called ancient astronaut theorists later proposed that Wernher von Braun, the architect of the Apollo program, had anticipated more than dust and rock on the moon's surface. They pointed to one of his most controversial remarks, a warning that the next great conflict might not be fought between nations, but against forces beyond our planet. Historians have long debated what he meant, whether it was a comment on humanity's destructive potential in the atomic age, or a veiled reference to knowledge never publicly shared. Other accounts claimed von Braun had once suggested that humanity's ascent into space was aided by technologies not entirely of our own making. There is no evidence to support such claims, yet they continue to fuel the mythology surrounding the space race. According to these theories, what began as exploration may also have been reconnaissance, an effort to confirm whether traces of other intelligence existed on the moon. Those ideas grew bolder in the years that followed, focusing on Apollo 17. the final manned mission to the lunar surface in 1972. Officially, it was a scientific expedition dedicated to geological study. Unofficially, according to speculation, it was something else, a retrieval operation designed to investigate and possibly recover ancient technology. The astronauts landed in the Taurus Littrow Valley, a rugged region surrounded by steep, angular ridges. Some enthusiasts noted that one nearby formation appeared hexagonal, its symmetry unlike typical lunar geology, and suggested it might conceal artificial structures beneath the dust. During the mission's broadcast, cameras mounted on the lunar rover were controlled remotely from Earth. For several minutes, the feed focused away from the astronauts' activity, showing only the landscape. When the image returned, the crew had re-emerged beside their vehicle. To some observers, the unseen interval became a window for speculation, a gap in which secrets might have been found and quietly concealed. Among the more persistent claims is that the crew encountered an unusual site known as Shorty Crater. There, the astronauts reported discovering orange soil, a surprise in a world of gray dust. Later analysis confirmed the color was caused by volcanic glass rich in oxygen, a relic of ancient eruptions. Yet conspiracy theorists saw more in the images, shapes within the crater that appeared geometric, mechanical, or even anthropomorphic. When researchers such as Mike Barra and Richard Hoagland examined early photographic negatives, they argued that one object bore metallic reflections, with what looked like a red stripe across a feature resembling a mouth, an impression they described as the faceplate of a damaged robotic figure. Mainstream scientists dismissed these interpretations as optical illusions, artifacts of lighting and film exposure. But to those already convinced that the moon held hidden relics, the pictures seemed like confirmation that humanity was not the first intelligence to stand there. As the years passed, the divide between history and speculation deepened. For most, the Apollo program remains a triumph of human ingenuity, a testament to what determination and science can achieve. For others, it is a story with missing chapters, a journey that reached the stars but returned with secrets never told. Whether the strange shapes on the lunar surface are products of shadow, geology, or imagination, the fact endures that the moon still holds its silence. And perhaps that silence, more than any rumor, is what keeps its mystery alive. Ancient astronaut theorists have long argued that the story of the moon did not end with the landing itself, and that what humanity found there may have been far more extraordinary than anything ever disclosed. During the Apollo 11 mission in July 1969, just after the lunar module touched down, there occurred a brief but puzzling gap in radio communications. A silence of roughly 2 minutes between the crew and mission control. The interruption, though later explained as a routine technical delay, became the center of enduring controversy. According to accounts attributed to engineer and NASA communications specialist Otto Bender, several amateur radio operators claimed to have intercepted secondary transmissions during that period, allegedly on private frequencies, not broadcast to the public. These reports suggested that the astronauts described seeing unidentified craft positioned along the rim of a nearby crater. Shapes unlike any geological formation, arranged as though they were observing the landing from a distance. Nothing in NASA's official record confirms such exchanges. Yet the rumor spread through the control rooms of Houston within half an hour of the touchdown. In that moment of silence, legend took root. Those who worked with the Apollo program later noted that each astronaut had access to a separate medical communication line, one that was not aired on the main public channel, and could have allowed discreet discussion if needed. This technical reality added fuel to speculation that certain conversations might have been withheld for reasons of security or discretion. Whether the claim holds truth or not, the story persisted, carried by word of mouth and amplified through the decades until it became inseparable from the mythology of the moon landing itself. Observers often point to the televised debriefing that followed the crew's return to Earth. When Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins faced the cameras, they appeared subdued, their voices measured, their expressions distant. To conspiracy-minded audiences, this restraint looked like the weight of something unspoken, evidence, perhaps, of a secret encounter or a revelation too overwhelming to share. To historians, it was simply the fatigue of men who had endured the most demanding mission in human history and carried the burden of its expectation. Yet the perception remained that behind those steady eyes lay a story untold. In the years that followed, Neil Armstrong would reflect on the accomplishment in quiet, philosophical terms. He spoke not of conquest, but of a threshold crossed, describing humanity's first steps on the moon as the opening of a new age, one in which the human species, for the first time, had the ability to walk upon more than one world. His words framed the event not as an ending, but as a beginning. After Apollo 11, NASA continued the journey with 6 additional manned missions to the lunar surface, each extending the reach of exploration and deepening scientific understanding. The program would culminate with Apollo 17 in 1972, closing an era that had carried humanity from dream to deed. Yet for all that was recorded, measured, and broadcast, one mystery endures: the silence that fell over the airwaves for those 2 minutes in 1969. A pause that, for some, still echoes as the most haunting moment in the history of exploration. In the end, The story of the moon is not only the story of exploration, it is the story of humanity itself. From a boy in Prussia gazing through a telescope to engineers tracing equations across the glow of computer screens, every step toward that distant world was a reflection of our longing to know what lies beyond. The Apollo missions brought back rocks and dust, yet what they truly returned was a mirror in which we could see both our genius and our doubt. Whether the moon holds secrets buried beneath its gray plains, or only the silence of ancient stone, it remains a monument to our courage and our curiosity. Wernher von Braun once said that the will to explore is older than history, born from the same restlessness that made our ancestors cross oceans and mountains. Standing on the edge of the void, we proved that the human spirit could leave the earth and touch another world. But the moon, silent and unchanged, still watches us from above, a witness to everything we have learned and everything we still refuse to understand. Between science and myth, between the truth we record and the mysteries we imagine, it waits. And as long as it waits, so will we. Looking up through the darkness, wondering not only what is out there, but what that endless reflection of light still wants us to find.